Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Collie the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. When it comes to directors, I've grown rather fond of Guillermo del Toro. He not only takes a ton of risks, but he's also a great visionary, bringing to life an obscure comic book character in the form of Hellboy. Yes, I do continue to talk about the Hellboy franchise this season, #shameless plug. But today, I'm going to talk about his most well-known and some would say best film. With that said, let's get some history out of the way. So, all of this came from Guillermo del Toro's notebooks. He drew few doodles, ideas, drawings, and plot bits. All of this was based on some lucid dreams he had of a faun, based on the Greek mythology creature of Pan. He wanted this faun to be a major character, with a pregnant woman falling in love with the creature. However, it eventually turned into a dark fantasy film set within the period after the Spanish Civil War, occurring concurrently with World War II, something that Del Toro's friend and actor, Sergio Lopez, wanted to be a part of desperately. By 2006, the film was completed and released in the winter in the United States, and releasing in the fall in Mexico and Spain. It is a film entirely in Spanish with the English subtitles written by Del Toro himself due to his disappointment with other translations of his other films. To say this impressed people is an understatement. This was beloved by so many, and was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and taking home 3, and is still to this day considered his magnum opus and a classic. However, what are my thoughts? Well, I'm glad you guys are here because we're going to find out. This is El Labyrinto de Fano, aka Pan's Labyrinth. It's 1944, and the Allies have invaded Nazi-held Europe. In Spain, a troop of soldiers are sent to a remote forest to flush out the rebels. They are led by Captain Vidal, played by Sergio Lopez, a murdering sadist, and with him are his wife, Carmen, played by Adriana Gil, and her daughter from a previous marriage, 11-year-old Ofelia, played by Ivana Baquero. Ofelia witnesses her stepfather's sadistic brutality and is drawn into Pan's Labyrinth, a magical world of mythical beings. Going into this, I had little to no expectations, and I didn't expect to feel anything. However, coming out of this, I was over the moon at how extraordinary this was, and came out of it a little choked up. Yes, this movie actually made me want to cry, which is a feat that not many films are able to accomplish. It just comes to show how much Guillermo del Toro cares about filmmaking, and the lengths he'll go to make a project absolutely full of passion. I didn't expect that at all, but now I'm definitely craving more from him. So, let's talk about what this film does right, and how it actually managed to make me nearly burst into tears. Right off the bat, this is how you do a compelling female protagonist. Ofelia is a young girl, and she has a ton of character. She's a curious young girl who wants to escape the darkness around her. She loves reading fairy tales and is caring for her sickly mother. When given the chance to escape from her current predicament, she takes on the tasks of the faun to take on her destiny as a princess, which nearly ends up with her death thanks to a toad and the pale man, about whom I have more to say later. Even though she fails at first and loses close to everything she has, she still fights until the bitter end to protect herself, even refusing to hurt her little brother, regardless of that being her path to freedom. By the end, I cared when she died, and was happy she was able to rest in a much happier place. Overall, it just comes to show that Guillermo del Toro wrote one of cinema's finest female characters. Yes, I went that far. Unlike Captain Marvel, or Rey, or She-Hulk, or the remake version of Ariel, Ofelia is flawed, makes mistakes, learns from them, is brave, and actually sacrifices her own life for her own brother, who was only born a few days ago. She was interesting and had a character arc. This is how you do it. Not like this, like this. The other great female character I can give props to is Mercedes, played by Maribel Verdú. Not only does she serve as a second mother to Ofelia, but she also does the right thing for the greater good, helping a group of rebels in their battle against the Spanish military led by a captain whose home is just miles away, mind you. Not only that, but she's one of his servants, and she decides to go turncoat on him. Not only is that brave, but it also is something most are afraid to do. But not her. She too risks her life and ended up being free from the misery. Also, I like this actress a lot. She was great in The Flash, regardless of that movie's quality, and she was great here. As far as Ophelia's mother goes, she doesn't really serve a purpose in the story, but I do think she was a well-written character, and you can feel the close bond she has with her daughter, and her increasingly declining health as the film goes on. As a matter of fact, her death is the one that choked me up, because that was where Ophelia lost her sense of protection and a bit of the only family she had left. She did have her newborn brother, but she didn't get to know him well before her own death. She knew her mother, however, very well. That's what made the scene so tragic. Then there's the Faun, who's brought to life by Doug Jones. The Faun is an old and wise animal destined to help Ophelia on her journey to a better world, but he also gives her the hard truth. He's less of the Obi-Wan, Dumbledore, or Gandalf figure, but rather a more tough love kind of guy. He pushes really hard for her to be the princess and punishes her for failing, and even turns his back on her for refusing to let her brother be hurt. Yeah, he's kind of a douchebag, but it does deliver a message that actions have consequences, and it was good to see him at the end rewarding Ophelia with her better life. It also helps that he gives her the fairies as a sense of security, which are brilliantly used as guardians in their challenges. As far as the other characters go, before we talk about the villain and the monster, the only other one I have much to say about is Dr. Federi. Or I don't know how to pronounce it. He's a well-mannered man who helps Mercedes and her Ed to aid the rebel soldiers, and a man who cares nothing of what Captain Vidal wants. In the end, his death was pretty sad, considering that he was a genuinely good man, which makes you hate Captain Vidal even more. As far as the rebels go, they're not in it much, but the two with the most personality are Pedro, who's Mercedes' brother, and the one that stutters, whose death is really silent and somber. Now, let's talk about the villain, Captain Vidal. I have to say, this guy gave me the freaking creeps. Calling him a brutal soldier is an understatement. He is a freaking monster. He's a selfish douchebag with the belief that not all men are born equal. He kills innocents, those he disagrees with, and even disregards his own stepdaughter. He calls her a little B-word, for Christ's sake, which made me want to jump into the movie and kill him myself. The only thing he seems to care about is his legacy, as his father was a well-respected commander, which he desperately wants to follow, and his son, whom I assumed he would raise into a similar type of person. Guys, I gotta tell you, whenever this guy got a beating, such as getting stabbed several times, having his mouth sliced open, leaving a gnarly injury, drinking alcohol and coughing up blood, being overdosed with a sedative, and finally being shot and killed, I felt so good because this guy is such a beast and I just wanted to watch him get his, which he did, and I was extremely satisfied. It's like he's Amon Girth from Schindler's List and Darth Vader combined. I never knew I needed that combo, but I have it, and I'm frightened. I don't know what else to say. Captain Vidal is a sinister, ruthless, and downright scary villain. As far as the monster I wanted to talk about, I expected the Pale Man not to be as frightening as he was, knowing I don't get spooked easily by movies, but dude, seeing those pictures on the wall, seeing him put his eyeballs in his hands and putting them on his head, eating two fairies, chasing Ophelia around the castle halls and trying to grab her while flinging her around like a zombie, actually creeped me out way more than I thought it would. And I ended up needing to see Luigi saying "few maidens" once that scene was over, because God knows I needed a massive break. Overall, these characters that are going to stick with me for a long time are what we have in the movie, and I know that for sure. So let's move on to the effects. Honestly, the practical effects are where this movie shines. The Faun and the Pale Man were both portrayed by Doug Jones, and this guy can honestly portray every single creature in the suit. After Abe Sapien, I had no idea how he would top that, but this came along and showed me. He can play two different creatures in one movie and give them very different performances. At the same time, that nasty looking wound on Captain Vidal's face after he was slashed with a knife looked pretty gnarly and gross. I don't know if it was CGI or practical, but hot damn, it convinced me. The fairies and the toad are brought to life with CGI, and while they look pretty good, they're not as good as the practical effects the movie had to offer. Enough said. As far as the music goes, it was composed by Javier Navarrete, who delivered a whimsical, haunting, and sometimes very tragic score that helped the movie get me the feels, because it added a lot of scenes that already had a ton of heavy emotional baggage. That's all I have to say. Finally, we have the tone. Not only is this movie frightening, it's also violent as hell. I didn't expect an R-rated movie, but that's what I got. There's a ton of blood, and it isn't there for the sake of just being there. It's used very effectively. My favorite uses of blood are when Captain Vidal is being stabbed and sliced, when Ophelia's blood brings her to the other realm, and the very satisfying death of Captain Vidal, which had his eye rolling to the back of his head. God damn it, I love watching that. As far as scary scenes go, I'd say the scariest scene is the scene with the Pale Man. If I saw this thing running around my house, I'd lock myself away somewhere safe, because this thing is too frightening for one person to handle. Overall, I have to say that Pan's Labyrinth is excellent. It was emotional, frightening, and extraordinary. This is a film that will not only get better over time, but also continue to be thought of highly by me as my career goes on. Which is why I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. A dark fantasy film that will leave you scared and in tears. Well, that's it for this colossal review. I never expected to talk at length about this film, but here we are. Tune in next week when we take a look at the continuation of the Hellboy franchise before the theatrical sequel that was officially released in 2008. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.